Good afternoon. The Intelligence and National Security Foundation and Cornerstone would like to welcome you to the Diversity and National Security Critical to Securing Our Nation at Home and Abroad. Please welcome INSA President Suzanne Wilson Heckenberg.
Good afternoon. And again, thank you for joining us for this conversation. NSIF is pleased to partner with Cornerstone Government Affairs on this programming today. Our topic, diversity and national security, is one our community continues to struggle with. While there are countless studies and reports echoing the national security priority of a diverse, inclusive workforce, it is clear we still have significant work to do in order to create a national security community that reflects the people it serves. To discuss this issue, we have an incredible lineup of senior leaders from the IC, Congress, industry, and academia on the program today. To kick things off, I am pleased to welcome our keynote speaker, Congressman Benny Thompson, who is serving his 14th term in the House of Representatives. It is the longest serving African American elected official in the state of Mississippi and the lone Democrat in the Mississippi congressional delegation. He began his grassroots political activism as a civil rights champion while a student at Tougaloo College, an historically Black college in Jackson, Mississippi. He joined the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, known as the SNCC, and helped to organize voter registration drives from African Americans in the Mississippi Delta. He served as an alderman and mayor of his hometown, Bolton, and as a supervisor in Hinds County before being elected to Congress in 1993 to represent Mississippi's 2nd District. As chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, he introduced and engineered passage of the most comprehensive Homeland Security package since the September 11th attacks, the 9/11 Commission Recommendations Act of 2007. Chairman Thompson has been a longtime advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the federal government and throughout American society. Just 2 examples. In 2019, he introduced legislation to promote diversity at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy and a bill he introduced to promote diversity in DHS and in the cybersecurity and intelligence fields. The Department of Homeland Security Intelligence and Cybersecurity Diversity Fellowship Program Act was passed into law in December. We are honored to host Chairman Thompson today. Chairman Thompson, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you to the Intelligence and National Security Foundation for its meaningful work to address contemporary intelligence and national security challenges. And thanks to Cornerstone for partnering with the Foundation to hold this important conversation today. I'm honored to have been invited to speak on the importance of diversity in national security. As chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, a committee of which I've served for 16 years, I've consistently stressed the need for the Department of Homeland Security and all national security agencies to develop diverse and inclusive workforces. While the representation of minorities, women, and people with disability in the national security field has increased over the years, I remain concerned about the national security's establishment's commitment to hiring, retaining, and promoting individuals with diverse backgrounds and ensuring a welcoming environment for such individuals. Around this time last year, my committee held a hearing on building a diverse and inclusive workforce to meet the Homeland Security mission. And at that time, women made up only 35% of DHS's workforce, and people with disabilities made up a mere 11% and were leaving the department at a higher than expected rate. Moreover, leadership positions at DHS were predominantly filled by white men, with minorities holding only 22% of the department's most senior leadership positions. This is unacceptable. The homeland is best served by a workforce that is representative of our great country. When you don't have adequate representation of all Americans at the table, you'll fail to consider the wide variety of challenges facing different communities. Moreover, the lack of diverse individuals in national security planning and decision making hinders our ability to serve all affected communities equally. To address the elephant in the room, I can help wonder how the underrepresentation of diverse persons may impact relevant agencies' preparedness before the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Although the rioters' success in breaching the Capitol was shocking, the objective was to do so was the predictable realization that the threat posed by violent white supremacists has steadily been increasing. The warning signs prior to the 6th were clearly missed, and I'd like to think that if minorities made up more than just 26% of intelligence positions across the federal government, and women more than just 39%, that may not have been the case. So to help develop this effort and create a more diverse national security enterprise to better serve and protect all Americans, I introduced H.R. 8993, the Department of Homeland Security, Intelligence and Cybersecurity Diversity Fellowship Program Act, which was signed into law via the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021. This legislation establishes an Intelligence and Cybersecurity Diversity Fellowship Program at DHS for eligible college students, including students at HBCUs or minority-serving institutions. Successful completion of the program leads to full-time employment at DHS. As the only African American chairman of a national security committee in Congress, this has been a long-standing priority of mine, and I'm committed to ensuring that it is fully implemented by the department. However, the work does not stop with the fellowship. That is why I'm pleased to be speaking with you all today. I'm optimistic that this conversation will drive solutions to address this critical need, and I look forward to working together to better diversify the national security workforce. Again, have a successful program, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson, for your leadership and longstanding commitment to creating diverse, equitable, and inclusive national security workforce. Your remarks have certainly set the stage for today's roundtable discussion, and we genuinely appreciate your candor. Before we get started today, I'd just like to make a few housekeeping notes. First, we hope to make this as interactive as possible. Please submit your questions through the Q&A box on the right side of your screen. We have over 600 registrants registered for this virtual program today, and we'll do our best to get to your questions. Second, we are pleased to have members of the press tuning in for today's program. This program is on the record and being recorded. Now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our moderator, Charles Carithers. Charles is a principal at Cornerstone Government Affairs. In this capacity, he advises a diverse set of clients with interest related to national security, defense, and homeland security. Previously, Charles served on the professional staff of the House Homeland Security Committee, where he advised Chairman Thompson on national security and intelligence matters. Charles's career also includes 11 years in the IC, where he served in various leadership capacities at both IARPA and ODNI, Charles, I'm going to turn the stage over to you now.
Thank you for the warm introduction, Suzanne. Welcome to the Cornerstone Government Affairs and INSIF Black History Month National Security Roundtable. And thank you again to the Chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, Representative Benny Thompson, who has worked tirelessly on addressing the very issue of increasing diversity in national security. We are excited to have this esteemed panel of thought leaders in attendance who have all taken time out of their day to have a candid conversation about the importance of diversity and inclusion in national security. Rita Sampson, with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, is the intelligence community's Chief Diversity Officer and Director of Equal Employment Opportunity. She is a principal advisor to the Director of National Intelligence on all matters relating to diversity, inclusion, and compliance with federal EEO laws, policies, and directives. Wendy Parker is a national security advisor for the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, advising Speaker Pelosi on matters related to national security and international affairs, and overseeing the activities of the Armed Services, Intelligence, Foreign Affairs, and Homeland Security Committees and the Appropriations Committee's counterparts. George MacArthur is Vice President and Portfolio Manager at Mantech, serving the intelligence community. He develops strategic plans for improving global service operations, modernization, and quality assurance. And finally, we have Ladrigus Murray, Senior Vice President of Public Policy and Government Affairs at the United Negro College Fund, where he develops and drives strategies and public policy priorities to ensure equality in education and careers for students from underrepresented communities. Thank you all. So let's begin by getting a little direct here. This question is for all the panelists. There are 18 independent offices and agencies or elements that make up the intelligence community, and a host of other agencies dealing with foreign policy and broader national security. Why aren't these executive branch agencies or offices more reflective of how America looks? Why isn't there more diversity within the national security arena?
Well, I will start. Charles, thank you for that question. And I also want to thank INSA for hosting today's conversation. What you're asking is the obvious question, and it appears to be a straightforward and simple question, but I think that we have to acknowledge that the answer to that question is complex. It's rooted in the history of the intelligence community. It's rooted in a long-standing practice of who is invited into the intelligence community. And after many decades, since the 1940s, being able to shape and change that directive. I think that we all know that the importance of diversity is quite obvious. The importance of not just bringing diverse people to the table, but inviting them to be the key decision makers at that table. We know that it's critical because if you have just one school of thought and your business is thought production, then your product is not very good. It's not going to beat the competition. And so we're in this competition to get the best insight, the best information, the best technology advantage, innovation. And so common sense, science, all of that says we must be more diverse, right? Groupthink, where you have a bunch of people in the same, that look the same, come from the same background, it's not the product that we are selling. We have to devise our decision makers with the best information. And so the business case is out there. We know it, we subscribe to it. What's the answer? We've studied this for probably a good 30 solid years. We have reports that could stack up on the table like crazy. And what the truth is that there is no singular answer. There's no singular thing that you can do to change this dynamic. It is, you must do a lot of things. You must source your talent. You must build relationships. You must be intentional and deliberate about recruiting, about hiring, about communicating what the intelligence community is, reaching communities who may not have ever heard of us, or who have a different notion of what we do. Then we must inform our recruiters. We must inform our hiring managers. We must model the behaviors that we want inside the community. If and when we acquire that talent, we have to nurture and we have to take care of everyone who enters into the door and make them see that they can ascend to higher ranks. We have to search for the right talent in these core mission areas. And I'm happy to talk a little bit as we go on about what we're doing around each of these areas. But I'll just sum it up by saying there's no singular root cause for our problem. And I, of course, bias, we're addressing those issues as well. There's no singular root cause, and our approach must be complex. And finally, we must be held accountable for those results. So I'll stop there.
And that's good. If I can tag on to what Rita said,
Please.
Another part of that, Charles, is we must make sure that there is active campaigning at the senior leadership level. We have to be able to bring those diverse ideas, as Rita described, and bring those to the table so they can be heard, so you can get those different perspectives. So with that, it's vitally important that all employment sectors, civilian, military, contractor, are all doing the same thing, but it starts with active campaigning and it starts at the top of leadership.
I couldn't agree more. It's really incumbent upon managers to ensure that every member of the team, every member of their community feels like they are valued, that they are able to contribute and perform at the highest levels, and that there is kind of an opportunity there, an opportunity for growth, an opportunity to just kind of develop as a professional, and to know that you're supported. And I think that that really makes a difference. Unfortunately, with too many people, number one, they're concerned that they won't be valued in that way if they come into an intelligence community that doesn't kind of reflect America, right? And some people also, after they're inside, it's a different world for some people. And therefore, I think it's really important that we also have structures inside that support individuals, support them at the office level, support them at the division level and at the agency or departmental level as well. And so that's when, mentoring comes in to play, but also kind of develop programs at the departments and agencies that really, really focus on workforce inclusion, workforce development, training opportunities, etc. And then we also, I also think that it's imperative that people understand that when we are looking for professionals in the intelligence community, in the legislative branch, anywhere, we're looking at resumes, we're looking at what kind of experience they bring to the table. The same thing in the private sector. And we want to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to get those internships early on in their careers, to get those professional, opportunities and rotations that make such a difference as they're competing, for jobs as they progress in their career. So those things are really, really important as well. And managers make a big difference in across the board there.
Just to add in to round out the entire group, in other aspects where we have a national interest, the federal government takes a role in terms of developing the pipeline, making investments to develop that pipeline, and noting how important our national security is, noting the role that the federal government plays for all of us in national security. An investment must be made to ensure that the pipeline is rich with diversity. And so that is the kind of leadership role that only the Congress and only the administration can truly make. So those two branches have to really prioritize making an investment to ensure that diversity is included in this noteworthy workforce.
And can I piggyback off of that, Rodriguez? Because I have this personal mantra, which is prepare the future and meet at the mission, right? You cannot go to a college and say, I'm looking for someone who's had 6 years of physics if we're not helping to invest at the K through 12 level. And so I'm so excited to see new legislation that the CIA has for working more closely with the K through 12 pathways. The studies are out there. If you do not have a child tracked by the 5th grade for the right math, for advanced math, and have them feeling supported and energized and to see themselves in the future, you can't be surprised when you don't see the diversity talent pool. Now, that said, let me also suggest that we're not looking hard enough for that diversity talent pool because it's out there, but we have to know that we are in a competition for talent. You know, it's totally out there. Right now, we have some phenomenal partnerships with historically Black colleges and universities engineering programs through a group called Advancing Minorities' Interest in Engineering. By working with the deans of HBCU engineering schools, we're able to have a latch up and understand what the universities need, what the students need, and then in return, we're able to talk to them about our IC missions. And that's why I say meet at the missions. Really exciting work. We've gotten the deans to register for research projects through one of your organizations, Charles, IARPA. They've signed up to do design challenges with IARPA, with the CIA labs. And so understanding what the universities need, understanding what our role is in shaping the future talent pool, it's all just really critical and just meeting at the mission. And that's it.
That was
Same
great.
thing in the private sector too, as one more point I want to make. So MedTech, we partner with HBCUs and not just one or two, quite a few, because we realize there is a diverse group out there that we need to connect with and make sure that we get that diversity because it's going to help in the perspective when it comes to offering solutions and services to national security. Our mantra, of course, is securing the future. You know, MedTech, 43% of our company are veterans. So we make sure that our people understand what the mission is focused on the mission, but also how important that is to the national security. So therefore that we are fully invested in that. But our breadth of taking more leaps into HBCUs is really going to help in the future and help shape things and provide those opportunities for others as they want to make a career path in the private sector.
Thank you for that, George. You know, one thing that was unique back when I was an intelligence officer with the ODNI, myself and a brilliant IC officer at ODNI, Sophia Lee, we realized we need to go above and beyond than just attending a simple job fair at an HBCU.
Correct.
So one thing we did, we reached into our own richer internal network at HBCUs, which we were both graduates of, and we reached out to professors. And we asked, prior to this job fair, could we come down a few days early and teach intelligence security and national security 101 module in their respective courses to give the students a flavor of what the intelligence community is, what the national security arena is, but more importantly, what it is not, and try to dispel certain myths and beliefs, and then paint a picture of what a rich career in national security in the executive branch or in Capitol Hill may look like. Now let's pull the thread on Congress a little bit. Wendy, what role should Congress play in ensuring executive branch agencies make diversity and inclusion a mission imperative? Where do you see Congress having the greatest impact in ensuring these agencies are a reflection of what America really looks like?
Well, one of Congress's most important roles, other than appropriating money from departments and agencies, that comes into play too, is oversight of the activities. In particular with the intelligence community, it's even more so important because traditionally there hasn't been as much transparency when it comes to intelligence community operations. And so the role of Congress is even more important there. because of the classified secret nature of the work of the intelligence community in too many cases. And so, you know, Congress has been very engaged and very active. Decades ago, Congressman Lou Stokes from Ohio was chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. This is in the late 80s and early 90s, and he created the Stoke Scholarship program. Now, this was a model program, and a lot of other programs, scholarship programs, have been modeled off of it, you know, kind of in the years since. But it was designed to ensure that underrepresented groups were able to get scholarships and have internships in the community and then become full-time employees of the intelligence community. It started off with one or two agencies, CIA, NSA were the early ones, and then it expanded across the intelligence community. Now this is, you know, again, but it had to be statutorily authorized, and it also had to be funded. Appropriations had to be set aside for it. And so Congress has been very active in ensuring that not only that program is funded, but a lot of subsequent programs too. And so we have the Pickering Scholarship Program. At the State Department, we have the Rangel Fellows Program. And we had just a host of different fellowships and other programs. The National Security Education Program, of course, is out there too. But Congress has to continue to be creative in this way and continue to fund and support these programs, but also rigorous oversight. That's why these reports that Congress is requiring are so important. Rita talked about how she could stack report after report up, and the HIPC, the House Intelligence Committee, started mandating reports on demographics decades ago. But initially, those reports weren't even meaningful. They had everyone banded. They had like 3 bands of employees, and we really couldn't tell anything from those statistics. It really took Dr. Lenore Peters-Gant, for those of you who know her, to come in and revamp. She was very, before she arrived, she had like a PhD in human resource management. So, but she revamped the report program and made it meaningful. And it allowed us to see kind of those different things, how different factors were playing in to our demographics. And so thankfully, we got more insight, which allowed us to see that a disproportionate number of individuals from majority backgrounds were, taking advantage of rotational programs, were receiving awards, cash awards and other bonuses, were a part of other, other opportunities, scholars and residence programs and so forth. And we knew that there was a need to ensure that others were getting these opportunities as well. So that was very important. And again, this came about through the congressional reporting process and so forth. Similarly, the Congress has an opportunity to also build upon any positive advancements that are made by the executive branch. So, of course, like if Rita comes with a great initiative, she can sell it. And, if Congress agrees and the president agrees to send it down and the Congress agrees, then it's something, that, might get funded. But in addition to that, the executive orders, for instance, that presidents often sign into law, Congress oftentimes builds on those to make them, a statutory mandate. For instance, Jerry Conley, who is a representative from Northern Virginia and who sits on the Foreign Affairs Committee and the Government and Oversight Committee, recently introduced legislation to advance diversity and inclusion in the national security workforce. Again, building upon some of the positive things we've seen early in the Biden administration. And so we're really excited about that. Of course, it requires more reporting, but also encourages initiatives to increase diversity and inclusion. And we have such active members now in the House and the Senate. I think you'll only see more of it. And we'll continue to have hearings, other oversight activity that's transparent. And we really do value input that we receive from not only the agencies, but the individuals who work in them.
Awesome.
And Wendy, can I pick up on the transparency is absolutely important. The work that you were talking about, Dr. Gant, and all these other data points that we've been requested to gather. We've now gotten to a point, and I know you know this, but of putting those reports out on the public websites. So they're not just in our closets, they're on the dni.gov website. You can go there and find all of the demographic reports that tell the story. And I think that is also another key part of what we've been doing, transparency. A couple of years ago, we took on a study where we looked across all 17 IC elements and said, what is the barrier? You know, it started off with the question, what's the singular barrier? What do we need to do? And so we looked at that. That report is also out there. It's the Workforce Concerns Report about barriers to inclusion and diversity. And again, it is such a complex rubric, but it's not just sitting back and going, well, it's complicated, so we can't undertake it. It's being very deliberate and intentional about hitting every possible touch point to shape what we need to do. And so one of the last thing I'll say is the program that Charles and Sophia led down at the HBCUs in the Atlanta Consortium opened the door to hiring, where our hiring officials got to be more in contact and touch with the talent that exists down in that Atlanta area. And so hiring has happened as a result of that. And I think deliberate leadership. Director Clapper flew all the way from DC to Atlanta to speak at Morehouse and to tell the people at Morehouse that Black Lives Matter. And he also flew down to Alabama, to Miles College, to meet with the students and the deans there. And so it is on our leadership to model the behavior and to model those values. And I know that Director Haynes is all about it. She's been talking about it, and she is ready. So we're really excited for what the future is holding for us right now.
Yep,
Rita,
I'm glad. Oh, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. So I'm glad you guys are touching on barriers. That is a very sensitive subject because it can go to a lot of different pathways. One of the things when you talk about diversity and inclusion, you look at equity and you also look at accessibility. So when you're trying to make sure individuals have equal stake in the game, you making sure that individuals have all the tools that they need to succeed. Then it gets to accessibility. Is everything accessible to them to be able to perform in the areas that they need to? Throughout history, we know it all the time, and we've seen it in the past. Performance experience can be gained. Performance can be there, but you also have to make sure all the tools and resources are there for people to succeed, because without having all the information, they cannot be fully successful in their pursuit.
I only wanted to mention the fact that, Wendy, you spoke at great length about how certain things must be in place. Rita, you spoke to a certain extent about the soft communication, the value of the director flying to those particular colleges to make sure that they knew that they were important to this community. It takes those kinds of soft messages, you know, the inclination of one to physically go and take the message to someone. You never know how many of the students that are in the audience that day will be influenced by that visit. Someone that they would only see on television or would only see online, making their institution a priority. And so all of those kinds of efforts are necessary. And hopefully, if we keep track well enough, we'll be able to see a measurable outcome.
That's right. That's right. Definitely. Definitely. And that's, you know, that kind of the soft kind of power, or what you might have it, that's been encouraged by members of Congress. Director Clapper, as Rita mentioned, flew down to Alabama, but he flew down upon the invitation of a member of the House Intelligence Committee, and that's Terry Sewell, right?
Absolutely.
And so again, having that diverse representation on the House Intelligence Committee kind of led to that additional contact that General Clapper had and so forth. I mean, it just, you know, all of this is on a continuum, right? And advocacy is required at every level.
Yes.
So can I very quickly talk on strategy? Because you have to have strategy. And we just in 2020 adopted a brand new approach. It's a very simplistic strategy, but it's going to be, I think, a game changer. So it's on our website always, dni.gov. 4 prongs in this strategy, and it's all 18 of our IC elements coming around this table together, knowing what we know and knowing what we must do. And so the first thing we're going to do is focus on people-centric leadership, focus on the leaders within the organizations, because what we know is they set the tone for success. Not just those that have their faces plastered on the front of a website, but those that are right there in the trenches working together. So we're going to focus on making sure people have those people skills to lead a diverse workforce. The second is compliance with the laws, making sure that discrimination and harassment are not occurring within the workforce. The third, and I think relevant really for this group, is promoting partnerships with industry, with private sector, with the Cornerstones and the Mantechs of the world and the UNCFs, and of course with our oversight folks on the Hill. But partnerships to increase access to diverse talent. And then the very fourth element of our strategy is investing in the workforce readiness. So it's all well and good when you hire people, but if you've not told them the secret code for success and you've not given them the tools to succeed, then don't be surprised if at some point they off ramp. And so really a lot of those secret keys are around mentoring, around sponsorship, around networking. Networking is that thing that people just don't tell you, that you better have a diverse network, and you better work that network. And I think people see it as some sort of, inauthentic thing to do, but it is the reality, and you need to learn what it is and how to do it. So those 4 goal areas for us are our focus, future forward, and we are seeing all kinds of great momentum behind talking about our efforts in this way. There is a campaign that we have. I swear this is the last thing I'll say for a few seconds. There's a campaign we have. It's called the Small Steps to Inclusion, and it goes under our pillar 1 about people-centric leadership. And basically, we're teaching people how to build a more inclusive workforce. It's one thing to say we need a more inclusive workforce, but if you don't give people the tools to create that inclusive workforce, then you're just talking. And so the small steps to inclusion, it starts with awareness, and it just continues to build upon exposure and action and social accountability. And so it's a campaign. It's going on right now, and if we pull all of these things together in our infrastructure, then we will see positive change. And I'll just stop there.
Thank you, Rita. And that's an amazing segue. George, President Biden signed an executive order that called for more diversity in private partnerships in the national security workforce. What do you see as private industry's vital role in national security?
Thank you, Charles. Private industry has a major role in national security. You guys heard me talking about Mantech. 43% of our employees are veterans, so they understand and they have the mission, desire to support and to continue to support national security and the intelligence agencies and the federal sector. Another part of that is Mantech is a government contractor, so we need to help drive innovation. And you do that by diversity, because diversity is a key element of that. So in order to provide those solutions and services going forward, you need to embrace diversity. Right now, we're in something that we call the virtual age. In the virtual age, you're going to need those abstracts. You're going to need those diverse perspectives to be able to provide those unique solutions and services to the government for moving forward, because it's going to help the mission, and plus it's going to provide a foundation for the company to continue to grow, but establish their place with the government as a partner, not as an individual, but as a partner. So that's what one of the things that Mantech is focused on, is making sure that we're always a partner with the federal government and addressing their needs when it comes to national security. The last piece of that is progress. We've touched on that a little bit here in this meeting. And when you talk about progress, you can see all the way up to the middle management level that progress has been made. But when you want to start talking about the senior level positions, and we talked about that earlier, the COO, the CEO of companies and so forth, in order to get to those areas, then there has to be a campaign that is done to be invested in that. And that starts with the top of leadership. Leadership dictates the drive. So in order for that to hold true, the top leaders have to make sure that they are a part of that campaign. It's not issued out to someone else. They are a part of it, and they are active, and they are aiding in that campaign. Additional to that, there must be executive level training and mentoring. You cannot move forward with understanding that you can have all the degrees in the world. You can have all the experience in the world. You can have all the performance that shows the metrics. But you need someone to help mentor you in those executive areas and provide that executive level training to be able to succeed. And once you do that, then you will have a pathway forward, and then it will start making a difference. And then you will start to see change happen within the companies.
George, thank you for that perspective. Ladrigus, now that we've heard from the private sector, what is the role of universities in this equation here? Part of the United Negro College Fund's mission is building equal access to education for these underrepresented students in which they can have competitive and fulfilling careers. Representing 37 HBCUs, 60,000 students, what would you like to see from the federal government in terms of outreach and recruiting for careers in the national security sector?
Great. Thank you, Charles, and thanks to everyone who put together today's panel. In terms of investment that we'd like to see from the federal government, it is definitely, and this is incumbent upon us to ensure that it happens, is that there should be funding investments to prioritize the production of these kinds of professionals to help diversify this workforce. We have to make sure that this pipeline is strong. And so you look at efforts to diversify other portions of national need, and you see that there are federal programs set up to help with the production of those types of professionals. The need to diversify in healthcare, whether it be medicine or dentistry, you have programs set up for that. The need to diversify in engineering, you have programs set up for that for the STEM professionals. And so if there is a need, and there is, to make sure that the national intelligence workforce of the future actually looks like the country that it serves, then we should invest funding. Now, it's incumbent upon us to know that that's necessary, make members of Congress aware of it. So we have to do the advocacy to make sure that members across the spectrum, whether they be Democrats, Republicans, or anything in between, know that this is an important factor for us, that we are prioritizing it in our curriculum. And we want to make sure that that pipeline is strong, because we feel like we have skin in the game to make sure that our country is safe for everyone. And so as long as that's part of what we're taking to the Congress, then we feel like we have a strong track record of Congress responding to us well, because we work on a bipartisan basis. And national security, all aspects of national security are bipartisan issues, and that's the way we have to approach it. So it's incumbent upon us, the colleges, universities, to make it part of our agenda. And we all know the first quarter of the year that we're in right now, this is the time to make members of Congress aware of those priorities. And so we intend to have it on the table from our perspective.
That's great.
Ladrigus, thank you for that. George and Rita, once we, tackle recruitment, how do we retain this diverse talent of employees? How do we ensure there is an inclusive environment where they can grow and thrive professionally before they may decide to depart for different endeavors?
I don't want to, I guess the simple thing is meet people at the door when they come in. Have effective onboarding programs. Use the employee networks effectively. We have right now 6 different employee affinity networks that go across the entire IC, from African American affinity network. We have the women affinity network. We have a deaf and hard of hearing affinity network. And those groups can create a cohort or a support system for employees. But that's not sufficient. It has to be embedded in an actual, and I'm going to use Ladriga's word, program that says, we value you on day one. You don't have to wander the hall and try to figure out what the secret sauce for success here is. We're going to actually tell you that and make sure that all along the way you are partnered with a mentor, with exposure opportunities where you can actually shadow people and have those aha moments about the business of intelligence, the mission. And so just not losing them, supporting them peer to peer, supporting them from the very top up, and then a formal program to make sure that we really are building their pathways for the future, and better succession planning, leadership succession planning. It's actual art and science to that.
Yep, and if I can add in there, Charles and Rita,
Please.
Perfect examples. And in addition to, even in the private sector, it must start with a commitment from the very top of the organization. It must start there. Senior leaders have to embrace diversity, inclusion, and retaining their key personnel. So 3 things. 1, it takes active involvement. So that means that they have to be a part of the campaign to retain their individuals. 2nd, you have to train their managers. Train their managers to be able to identify and eradicate any barriers when it comes to diversity and inclusion. Thirdly, as Rita stated, education. I mean, the executive level mentoring and education cannot be short stated here. I think we've talked about it numerous times in this forum. You must be able to have mentorship to kind of help guide the way, because that is not something you're going to earn in a textbook, and it's not something that you're going to earn in college. So that's something that has to be embraced, and that has to be something that has to be a part of it moving forward. Somebody said once before, a sign of a good leader is not how many leaders you have behind you, but how many leaders you create. I'm going to take that a step further. A sign of a great leader is a one that create diversity in their leaders. So it takes a great leader to be able to stand and say, you know what, this has to be about change, and we're going to start now.
Thank you, George. In the interest of time, let's take some questions from the field, from the audience. First question, how are we holding our intelligence agencies accountable for internal talent career growth and development into senior ranks?
Okay, I'll go. Diversity and inclusion is not a singular sport. It's not like when I was in college, high jumper, it was just me in the field. This is a sport where it's a relay, it's a pack race. It's like a football game. You have a team. And so you have to make sure that everybody on that team plays their position. And I think that goes to the nature of accountability. Very recently, we went to our executives committee, which is, the number 2s and all of our intelligence community elements. We went to their forum and we told them, this is what we need to do. We need to have measurable goals for diversity. And they said, we hear you. Yes, we are committed to measurable goals for diversity hiring outcomes. And so that's one thing that we've established right then and there. And then we said, we need to shape this organizational culture around inclusion. And they bought in on that. They said, yes, we will work to shape and model inclusive behaviors through the Small Steps campaign. And then we said, we will be visiting you one-on-one to consult with you about how you will increase diversity, how you will focus on equity, because that is what we're about in 2021, and also inclusion and opportunity. So schedule us a date on the calendar, because accountability is how we are going to help you get there, not just put it out there on the table and hope it happens, but we will be helping as consultants. And so we'll be doing that to drive accountability, to make sure that it's a part of how we operate. And we also built accountability measures into our 2020 through 23 strategy, our joint strategy. So those are the things that I would say.
Rita, I love the way you started off there. One thing that is going to be really important, and this seems like out of the box thinking to people who may not be on today's panel with us, is that you actually have to look for the diversity where it already is. You can't look to create diversity at the colleges where you wish it was. You have to look for the diverse populations that you need today and tomorrow where they are already being educated. And that is one of the reasons why so many of you on the panel have spoken about your partnerships and other aspects with HBCUs, because that's where diverse talent is already being educated. And so it's a little bit disingenuous, and I don't want to go too far, but a little lazy of some folks to say they don't know where to look for diversity. Diversity exists. You just have to go where it already is, which may be out of the box thinking for some, but as long as you're committed, like the plan that you just laid out, that you took to other important policy and decision makers, as long as you have that commitment and you want to think out of the box, then we can show you where to find the diversity. And we think that you're going to be pretty pleased with what you find when you actually get there.
You know, Ladrigus, you raise a very important point. Most HBCUs are founded to cultivate their students for public service. I can guarantee you there is a hunger to serve our nation among the students at HBCUs. And it's very important that government agencies have sustained engagement, not these one-offs. There needs to be relationships organically cultivated with HBCUs.
And it has to be both ways. So not just the federal government wanting to reach out, but then the institutions have to understand the value of the partnership, what it can mean for the students, what it can mean in terms of the kind of lives they can lead, and the service that we can give back to the country. You're right that that's in a number of our mission statements. And that's pretty awesome considering how the schools were founded and what period of time our people were experiencing when those institutions were being founded, for the desire to serve people, and implicit in that, serve a country that was probably much more imperfect then than it is now. And those students are able to help our country right now. It's just really, it shows the character. And I think that's something that national intelligence looks for. It shows the character of those who are cultivated at HBCUs. And if HBCUs can produce important leaders in government and other aspects, and I won't bore you by taking down all the names that you already know, then it's obvious that they can produce important leaders in national security that can help protect the rest of the country.
Yeah, you know, the HBCUs and the institutions that have spun from HBCUs, such as Black fraternities and sororities, your Divine Nine. So even if you're not on the campus of an HBCU, if you're going to another campus, being intentional that here, you know, you're making the phone call ahead of time and saying, I want to talk to the Pan-Hellenic Council on this campus, because we have people who are in these organizations, have at least a minimum of a 3-point-something GPA, and who've already committed their lives to service. So it's thinking differently about how you find and source talent, and intentionality is the buzzword. It is the real answer.
So Rita, Earlier in our discussion, you mentioned the importance of that K through 12 age range. So we have a question from the field here. If the K through 12 target age is important for a successful future in math and engineering, how can the parents and teachers in less fortunate neighborhoods compete and prepare their kids and students?
So I'm involved in some efforts in Montgomery County where I live. There's a Black and Brown coalition of parents and PTA and administrators and local officials. By being involved in these organizations, that's step one. Oftentimes, parents don't know how to prepare their children for the future. I'm like third generation college educated, but I have a 14-year-old who's in curriculum 2.0, and I can't help her. So I would imagine that those people who are have less access traditionally, they're having even worse struggles than that. So I think it's having these great conversations with parents. We did that this past weekend at the Alfred Street Baptist Church HBCU Festival. We were there. We talked to parents directly about how to get your access to things like the Stokes program that Wendy was talking about. And it's just going where those parents are as well as going through that K through 12. And just one example of where we've been in the studies and the information and how we've used that data and that information to inform our approach.
Right. And I would just add, I was so happy to see this expansion of K through 12 programs. NSA has had a K through 12 program for decades. They've been doing it. And anybody who knows NSA knows that they have the finest mathematicians in the world. Okay? They call them cryptologists or whatever, and they do all this super secret stuff and you never see them, right? And they can't talk about what they do, but they literally have the finest in the world. And they've had this program for all of these years to reach out to children in K through 12. And unfortunately, maybe some local families knew about it, but it wasn't as well known as I think it should be. But now, spread the word. These agencies have these programs, but also the National Society of Black Engineers. They have summer programs. They have summer camps, and it's my understanding that they're free for children. And very young children, to expose them to science, math, engineering, coding, all of those essential traits. Because you guys, even at the best schools, you're not going to get that extra exposure that really sets people apart, because that exposure is so critical, because those internships and opportunities, they start when you're 16, 17, 18 years old. And then some kids just build upon. And by the time they graduate from college, they have all of this extra stuff in addition to their STEM degree or whatever, that really sets them apart. And so we want to make sure that more minority students have that sort of exposure. There are also programs around this area, the DC metropolitan area, for girls who code and girls who code and girls who love science or something like that. So I would just encourage people to just kind of look up some of those programs. A lot of them are at no cost, and they're so critically important. In addition, I just want to go back to something that Rita was talking about being deliberate in your recruiting. I'll never forget when I was an undergraduate, this recruiter came down from New York, from JP Morgan, and I just happened to run into her. I happened to be in our Center for Black Culture at my university, which I didn't go to an HBCU. I went to I didn't. So, and she was there, and I happened to start talking to her, and she was amazing, but she was very deliberate. And this is I've been out of college for a long time. So she said, I want to do just kind of a town hall here in the Center for Black Culture. So I just kind of and there were people like me who weren't interested in going to Wall Street, but we still were able to hear from her because of how she went about her recruiting process. And it was very strategic. And I also think that for the National Society of Black Engineers, partnerships with them, critically important. You know why? Because everybody who comes up, or everyone who, in the intelligence community who we want to see grow and thrive, doesn't come in, right after undergrad. Lateral hires are critical. They are critical to kind of sustaining excellence in the community. And we have to make sure that people understand, if you are a woman or a minority and you're interested in the intelligence community and you're 15 years out of college or more, that you can still have a place there because you can be value added. You have a lot to bring to the table and there will be welcoming hands there. So I think we also have to focus on these lateral hires. Attrition is normal. I mean, you're gonna lose people along the way. So that's why you gotta replenish. You gotta replenish at the GS 13, 14, 15, and senior executive levels. We can't overlook that.
Thank you, Wendy. Go ahead, come in, George, please.
I appreciate when you touched on something that we touched on earlier before, and I wanted to circle back. When we talked about recruiting, so you have recruiting happens at two different phases. Sometimes you'll have recruiting where it's the basic recruiter that looks for availabilities for certain aspects. And then you have the other type of recruiting for the senior executive levels where they hire search firms to look for certain candidates. So it's there that they have to make sure that that diversity moves as well, because when you're looking for certain candidates, you want to make sure that they meet all the requirements, but you also want to make sure it's open and accessible to everybody. Just like you pointed out, those lateral moves, when someone moves from private sector to government or move from government to private sector, when the recruiting firms are looking for them, they're looking for the right candidates, but also maybe some diversity there. And in addition to education is extremely key. We talked about internships, we talked about colleges. One thing we do here at Mantech too, because we know sometimes people do not know which direction they're going. Sometimes kids are scholarly. So when we recruit, we also have degree programs where the kids do not have to pay for the degree. Since we are mostly in the defense sector, whether it's cloud, data analytics, cybersecurity, we're focused on the government mission. So therefore we offer those things up. So as you come on board, you may not have had a chance or an opportunity, but we make sure that we make that investment in those employees. So there's a couple of different ways, like Rita stated at the beginning, there's a couple of different ways that we could approach it. But if companies look at a lot of different avenues to assist, I think more progress can be made. And that point you just brought up is so critical, looking at the lateral moves, making sure that we're looking at everything in its entirety and not just a small portion of the population of who's interested in the position or who gets those calls.
Thank you, George. And I want to stick with you for just a brief moment. Are you seeing any real changes in the diversity at the board of directors or corporate level in the private industry?
Yeah, we are seeing some movement. We are seeing progress. But as always, it's not enough, right? You need to see that needle move. And the only way you're going to do that is to get that mentorship and that executive level training that you need. If you do not get the partnership, then there's opportunity is not going to exist. Most corporations have the internal succession plans, but then there's also the recruiting firms that they use to get the type of candidates that they look for. So that envelope has to be extremely wide. You have to open that envelope and make sure that that aperture can reach out to all candidates that are not only experienced, have the education, but have the performance history in their background to show that I can do this. I am fully qualified for this. So if the opportunity presents itself, I would like to be considered for that as well. So that's a part of that avenue, but there are more strides that have to be made in those board of directors positions, the COO positions, the CFO positions, the chairman of companies. I mean, you really must be able to want to make that change and participate in that. Otherwise, you will not see the progress that's necessary.
Thank you, George. Is there a process within the federal government to check if that pledge of equal opportunity employer agenda is actually implemented, starting from application pool to final selection of a candidate?
So there is a process, but I'm going to be the first to admit that there are some gaps, significant gaps in that process, and we're moving to close those gaps. I think one of the biggest ones is the applicant demographic information. So we need to do a better job of understanding who has applied for the jobs so that we can look at the delta between those people who've applied and those people who have come on board. So many IC elements have that applicant data capabilities where they're able to look and know the demographic background of the applicants. But much more work to be done in that area, including our LGBT community, where sexual orientation and gender identity capture data is lacking significantly. Persons with disabilities have a tendency to, be recognized, but not at the other end of it, have the sufficient accommodations. Those are some of the concerns that they've raised. And so from a race and national origin perspective, we need to know how has our outreach been effective? Who's actually applying? So that we can see something happen between the application and the onboard, and then look at that holistically.
Thank you, Rita. Another question for the panel. There exists a program that embeds experienced IC professionals within universities. Can this program be expanded beyond the Ivy ilk to HBCUs?
You mean, is it the scholars in residence programs?
That's one aspect of it. They didn't elaborate further.
Well, don't we have scholars in residence at HBCUs, Rita?
We do. North Carolina A&T, North Carolina Central. I believe there is one at Howard University currently. I know the programs have been in existence. Sometimes there's ebb and flow. You take professionals in certain specialty areas and embed them in departments. But I also believe that that question is a very good question. It goes directly to pillar 3 of our strategy around partnerships. So you don't just go to the universities, you partner with the universities. And you ask them, what are the skills gaps that you have in your faculty that mirror our mission requirements? And then you make sure you have the capability of supporting those universities. And I think the COVID environment has really illuminated the fact that we can have scholars and residents who are in their own kitchen at their table because we're all virtual. And so just expanding how we're thinking about those programs, I think we can and should do more.
Rita, what I think I heard you say is where there's a will, there's a way. And if
I believe
if one's truly invested, you can figure out a model that works. And you all named a few HBCUs, but I'm pretty sure that if we do some good outreach together, and I'm happy to work with you on that, there'll be plenty more that would be hungry for that type of investment in terms of a scholar in residence.
Let's do it. I learned this past weekend when I went to Alfred Street Baptist Church that UNCF is sort of a clearinghouse for scholarships and these type of organizations. So if we were to give you the list of all of the fellowships and scholarships and Stokes programs and Wrangle programs and give them to UNCF, then you can then disseminate those into the hands of the very parents and the students that we're looking to attract. So it's partnership, it's understanding that.
The institutions and other constituencies, graduates, et cetera, they look to us to be a clearinghouse. They look to us to inform them. They trust us to sift through the multitude of information and give them what's pertinent. And we take that role very seriously. We feel like we're trusted community partners, and we're willing to help you get the word out to the community that trusts us because we feel like there's so much more that can be done.
Trust.
And I would just also add, in addition to scholars in residence, there are also all kinds of other partnership programs with different colleges and universities. And one of them actually came as a result of congressional legislation. So the House Intelligence Committee many years ago said, look, you know, again, attacking this from all sides, we've got to figure out long-term and short-term goals and programs that can be instituted to help build your feeder pools, help build the number of individuals who move into core mission areas, because again, disproportionate representation of minorities and women in the support functions rather than the core mission areas. So to build those that representation in those core mission areas, and we need you guys to come up with a plan and do it. And so as a result of that, we had the Intelligence Community Centers for Academic Excellence that came about. And that program provides partnerships between the IC and universities, colleges and universities across the United States, and with individual professors, you know, so professors who are already at the institutions, but again, they're getting the support from the IC Centers for Academic Excellence program, programmatic support, making sure that the people, the individuals, the students have exposure, and it's worked out quite well. Now, it's not just with HBCUs or historically Hispanic universities, colleges and universities, but they are included in that group. And so I think that program has been really strong when it comes to partnership programs.
Yeah, that's an excellent partnership program. And I started thinking about how we make sure that when we offer the grants under the ICCAE programs, that the universities know it in sufficient time so that they can put in their packages to compete for these grant opportunities. We have another partner with the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. We've been working very closely with them over the last few years. And we were actually one of their government partner award recipients this past year because of the work that we're doing. So we want to make sure that those partnerships that we're investing in are there at the right time when these other key opportunities, those windows are open. And so that's part of the relationship building and the information sharing that goes on. Wendy, you mentioned the NSA programs. Gen Cyber is the name of it, GEN Cyber. We funded some more of those camps this past year. It is an amazing program. You should look it up. It is free. You know, you hear the word camp and you're thinking, okay, it's going to be cookies and milk or something. It's really not. And so just really, I would commend that to everyone to really go look and study what that does. It builds the capabilities for the teachers to teach the skills that we need for the future, and it excites the students and teaches them what we do.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you, Wendy. I would like to end this panel with a comment from a friend, a mentor and colleague to us all, Dr. Lenora Gant. It's important to encourage a panel of IC agency directors and mission directorate leaders to host fora such as this. They are decision makers, and hearing from those top tier senior leaders is important to help promote momentum. Thank you to all of our panelists for such an amazing conversation, and thank you to all of our attendees. We appreciate your participation and look forward to having you at future Cornerstone National Security Roundtable discussions. I will now turn it over to Suzanne for our final thoughts.
Thank you.
Well, I have certainly learned a lot. I'm delighted that this has been recorded. I was taking notes about different partnerships and programs and acronyms, and so I will be watching this recording again. It will be available on our website in the next couple of days. I also want to thank you, our panelists, for your contributions to today's discussion, as well as Chairman Thompson for taking time to join us for this important discussion. Also, a thank you to Cornerstone Government Affairs for being such a terrific partner in this programming. And for all of you watching online, thank you for joining us. Looking ahead, Earlier this week, INSA announced the launch of its inaugural 8A National Security Showcase. The June 8th and 9th virtual event offers the opportunity for 8A businesses to market their innovative national security technologies, applications, and services to procurement representatives from prime contractor and 18 IC organizations. Any 8A business with innovative national security products or services is invited to apply to participate. As part of our showcase outreach efforts, INSA will hold a March 9th webinar titled 8A and the IC, Big Opportunities for Small Businesses, that will feature small business representatives from several different companies, including Wovenware, a successful IC 8A subcontractor, and IVSys, a minority-owned small business active in the IC that recently graduated from the 8A program. We hope this webinar will help promising 8A companies better understand the opportunities across the IC and national security market, as well as reinforce why they should participate in the INSA showcase. More details can be found on our website. When this webinar ends, there'll be a short survey that pops up. Please take a few moments to complete it and let us know how we did. This concludes today's program. Stay safe and healthy and have a wonderful weekend.